everyone hear me okay? Amazing. So welcome. We've made it to the final talk of the day, so thank you for being with us. We know it's hot. And this is going to be such an exciting way and such a good way to end on. So we have 4 incredible female leaders who are basically open to be asked anything. So you can ask me that, and it's going to be a no-holds-bar Q&A, and it really is about everyone's journey to becoming these incredible leaders. So I'm going to introduce first Maze Ezerati. She is Marketing Director, ex-Subway, and she's going to be hosting our panel. Come on up. Karen Stacey, CEO of Digital Cinema Media and President of Wackle. Welcome. Joe Blundell, CEO of Crosstown, and finally Samira Brophy, Senior Director, Creative Excellence of IPSOS. Please welcome to the stage. Thank you.
I love it. Perfect. Yes, exactly. Perfect cue. Yes, exactly. Sorry for the kind of end of play, but a lot of energy, and I think everyone's coming. So thank you for coming and supporting and listening. It's amazing to have such accolade and speakers here today. So welcome to the, well, I wanted to say it's called You Can't Ask Me That, but actually we should change it to You Can Ask Me That, because today's session is really about sharing their experience. So I wanted to welcome everyone to the panel. I think we all know the headlines where we've seen that we got around 37% of marketing executives only held by women, and that's part of the IPA. And unfortunately, that's still quite low. And then around 14% of global creative directors, and that's by Creative Equals. So unfortunately, that's still a number that we need to work on. I'd love to, I guess, ask the audience and say, well, how many have you kind of put your hand up to those who have said, you know, you're being too emotional or you're high maintenance? Who's ever felt that at work? I know I have. Yeah, there's quite a few of us. But so if we were to kind of turn that, I'd love to introduce our panelists today. We've got Karen Stacey, who is the CEO of Digital Cinema Media and President of Wackle, so thank you for coming. Joe, who's CEO of Crosstown and also ex-Wackle, and Samira, who's Director at IPSOS. So thank you so much for joining. Let's jump straight in, because I think we have around 20 minutes of Q&A, and I'd love to open the floor to the audience. So please think about the questions you'd like to ask these amazing, brilliant women. Make sure that you go into the session, and within that you'll have the Q&A where you can actually put in your questions. So heads up. Please follow that. Let's jump straight in. Karen, I mean, obviously you've seen 2 sides of, you know, working both as CEO and also president of Wackle. Have you seen progress enough that you're looking for gender equality, or is it kind of just a tick box?
I think you've always got to look at where you've come from. Yeah. And we have a group of our Wacklers, or the fellows, who are retired Wacklers. And they really are women that we are standing on the shoulders of, because I wouldn't have liked to be a woman in the 70s or 80s. So wherever we are in a better place than we were. So I think that is good. And I just think you've just got to keep pushing on. And there's a lot of Wacklers in the room. So we have a really simple mantra, which is we really want to accelerate gender equality. And there are 5 different levers that move businesses on the most. And we talk about those levers a lot. And I think the one for me that is the most important is the promote for potential. And I think women are notoriously modest about their achievements. And I'll tell you a little story, because I don't think it starts when we're at work. So when my daughter was 10, we went to see different senior schools, and there was 3 different teachers, 2 heads from an all-girls school, 1 head from a co-ed. And the co-ed teacher said, now we all know that girls are good for boys, because boys mess around and they make them be sensible, and girls are just sensible from a young age. But I also think that boys can be good for girls, because I bet not one of you has a 10-year-old daughter who will put her hand up in class unless she's 150% sure she's got the right answer. So it doesn't start at work. It's not a work thing. So you boys, you haven't even asked the question. They shout Man United, roll around the floor laughing, and think it's really funny. So I just think knowing that, it's our job, like good teachers do, to look out for the talent in your teams and pick that talent out and then let them know you've got their back, because they won't do it on their own. And I just think men generally do more of that. So say the promote for potential, and I'm sure we talk about all the levers as we go through, but that certainly is the one for me where I just want to see a bit more difference. Because most of the time, you know, there's not many women I've seen that have been given a job they're really capable of and then given the support that they're found in.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And Joe, for you, obviously you've got a path in marketing, and now you've gone to the C-suite as CEO of Crosstown. How have you found that transition, and what's kind of, I guess, challenged you or pushed you out of your comfort zone?
It's fantastic. I have all the power now. So yes, I started actually in ad agencies, so I've had a kind of a career of thirds so far, although I'm hoping it's going to be quarters, because I'm just weighing up whether I want to do 10 Downing Street or Rockstar next. So I started advertising, I then transferred over into marketing, and there are lots of kind of similarities. And I think, you know, the reasons for those decisions, I'm quite logical in terms of the approach. And so I found it very helpful to kind of think, as I went through my career, what do I really enjoy? What do I really want? Where do I really kind of come alive? And actually, we were just having a conversation outside about the move from agencies into marketing. And it was at the point that I realised that the bit that I really loved was shooting films, messing around with creatives, and the further you go up, the further away you get from that. So moving sort of into marketing gives you a whole kind of other gamut. It was baptism of fire. I went into McDonald's at the time of Super Size Me. So only a few things to sort out. And then I sort of transitioned. So previous to Crosstown, I was managing director at Papa John's. And again, it's asking those really important questions, because I think, you know, as we're saying in terms of promoting for potential, it's also about asking yourselves really truthful questions and answering them, because actually how we define success isn't necessarily in a CMO title or a CEO title. And so finding your own path and finding your own success and what kind of brings you alive is really important. Having said that, you know, obviously we want more, sooner, faster. And just to build on something that Karen was saying, about just before COVID, don't ask me why, got invited to some 50-50 Parliament event at the House of Commons, trying to persuade me to become an MP. Obviously I didn't. But what was really interesting was they'd done a really big piece of research, and to put it in a nutshell, what they found was men woke up in the morning and went, I'm going to be an MP. And by the end of the day, they had found out who their local committee was, they'd filled in the forms, they'd put themselves forward. Women did the same thing, woke up, I think I might be an MP. But by 4 o'clock, they'd found all of the reasons why they thought that they wouldn't be good enough to do the job. And actually, all of the things that the women had as skill sets were really relevant to being an MP, but they talked themselves out of it. So I think that's one of the important things. Go for it, and don't let that inner voice talk you out of where you want to go.
Which is perfect, actually, because for Samira, I'd love to ask you, you've been at IPSOS obviously for a while now. How has that progression kind of come along, and what barriers have you faced? And were you kind of calling yourself out a little and saying, you know, or were you kind of gung-ho and head first?
A little from column A and a little from column B. So as you can probably tell by my lovely accent, I'm from India. So I moved here in 2006 to study music. I'm basically a failed musician. But before that, I used to work in kind of radio, making ads and contents. And I moved into research after I moved here. I kind of decided I needed to start taking my career a little bit seriously, because I was in my late 20s and the band wasn't paying the bill. So I've had like a kind of spotty career. And I've been at IPSOS now for 16 years. I've done many different jobs while I've been there, including looking after some of our big global client accounts, so jetting around the world. But I will say, I had a very interesting experience. I had a very interesting revelation about 3 years ago, and it was when I went on a leadership course after all of these years of kind of managing, doing. My first 6 years in this country, I was on a sponsored visa, which meant I was effectively, I felt a little bit, I didn't feel it at the time, but on reflection, the most excellent at absolutely everything, hoping that somebody would notice and go, okay, I see what you have done there, and sort of like elevate me. And it did happen in some regards. I got the titles, but it took me a long time to realize that the pay rises and all of those things did not come till I actually stopped and went, hang on, I need to ask for this and actually have an open conversation with my employer to go, thank you for the opportunities you've given me. I really appreciate it. I've done a lot of excellent work here, but you know, what's in it for me now? And I think that was I had like a real mindset shift looking back on my career history and realizing that like maybe working twice as hard wasn't always the answer. And I think I picked this up from a lady called Elaine Rodrigo, who runs the Insight team at Reckitt's, where she said, as you get further in your career, you need to stop worrying about how you manage your time, and you need to start thinking about how you actually manage your energy. It was the best advice I ever received. So yeah, I mean, I'm not in the C-suite. I'm plotting my way there, but I don't know what kind of C I want to be. Am I a CSO? Am I a CMO? Am I a CEO? You know, what is it? I'm you know, completely openly. It was 3 or 4 years ago. I was actually Googling, what does a CEO actually do? So if you've been in that place, I'm with you.
Yeah. Talk to lawyers and accountants a lot.
Too much time. No, but to your point, I think that's really interesting about obviously having come from India to here and kind of carving that space and carving that narrative. And I think more importantly, we don't tend to ask, right, instinctively. We wait for it to come to us. And I think that's really important about owning your voice and saying, actually, it's not always about overachieving or over-delivering. Your 100% is already amazing.
I think on that, it's really good to understand your value. And my biggest advice to everyone is get friends with your FD, because your FD knows your value more than you do, because he sits there with a P&L and he knows what you're bringing, your contribution. So my biggest tip in life is always get to know the FD and always understand what your value is, because you can't negotiate until you understand what your value is of the output of the work you do.
Yeah, 100%. What are you bringing to the table? Yeah, and I guess to that point, though, just talking a little about D&I inclusivity, where are we with that? I mean, I know you're obviously part of the Creative Equals. You know, have we moved forward post the Trump era? Are we, you know, stuck? Are we having those honest conversations, or is it still, again, tick box exercise?
I think we've moved on quite a lot, because I still have that feeling where sometimes, you know, when you walk into a room and you have, it's like an underlying tension. You walk into a room and you feel like, I need to prove myself worthy, versus walking into a room and feeling like, you know, I have to mess up before somebody thinks I have the right to be there. You call it what you want, like people call it by different names. So I feel like that has changed a lot, and I'll be honest, the more senior I've become, the more kind of leaders I've met, like these wonderful women here. Everyone at the top of their game is really, really lovely and open and willing to mentor. So it's about kind of almost breaking the ice and going, okay, you know what, I'm gonna go out and actually have some conversations with these fantastic women, because they have a lot of love to give, frankly. So I think that's changed. I feel like those barriers are coming down a little bit more. So yes, there is a little bit of tick boxing going along, but there are some amazing mentoring programs like the Creative Equals business course that I went on.
Amazing. And Joe, how are you navigating that? I mean, obviously as CEO of Crosstown, how are you trying to incorporate and be more inclusive rather than exclusive?
Well, I think I can only really talk about my little corner. And I think part of the approach that I take, is as simple as saying, I want to leave my corner of the world better than how I found it. And that goes across many dimensions. I'm really blessed at Crosstown because it is a very diverse, very young, very energetic, very opinionated group of people that work for us, and we celebrate that.
Yeah. Well done. Congratulations. Yeah.
Didn't even bring the donuts, and I still got a round of applause. Brilliant. And we just constantly celebrate that in terms of the approach that we take. I mean, I think, interesting, you can't take the marketer out of a CEO. So one of the first things that we did was look at the vision and the mission and the values. And we have a very simple mantra, which is together we rise. So obvious pun there, again, around donuts. But it's also reflective of the energy and the culture and what we're trying to create, so that people feel as if they belong effectively.
Yeah. And Karen, and sitting on the boardroom, right? You obviously have a great influence to kind of lead and inspire the team. How do you approach that thinking, like that mindset of making sure that you inspire the rest of the team to think much more inclusively, and kind of create those opportunities for minorities, for females, for a variety of diverse team and force?
I think if you're honest with yourself, you need to make the right decisions. Are usually quite easy to see. People make them not easy to make because they've got to have a difficult conversation with someone else. But the right decision is usually quite easy. So you just need to be a bit brave about it. Because I think, and I always think that you need to always just think about the future and what you want your future to look like. And the other point, building on Samira's point, is I am a real believer that everyone has a superpower. Everyone has a superpower that they can do a 9 out of 10. Not you can't do everything, and you've got to really, as the leader as well, you've got to understand, and it's really important to judge what can be a 6 out of 10, but what has to be a 9. But I'm a believer in that. And sometimes, and this is sort of through a male lens, which I think is really important to understand, because at the moment I think there's this tension, which is if women are winning, men are losing, which is just not true. And I just think because all the stats show that everyone benefits if there's gender equality. And if men ask me, and I just think that it is slightly tougher, but know your superpower. That's the biggest thing men have got to do, because if everyone's got a superpower and it adds more than anything else, then you'll get that job. But understand it and understand the contribution of that, not just to your vertical and to your team, but to the whole of the company. Because I think people should get the job because they're not just right for the job, but they're right for the company. And I think sometimes we look too singularly at that one focus rather than thinking, I'd rather have a C-suite of 7 and 8 out of 10 people that can work together, because they will move a company on quicker than 5 people that are 9 out of 10.
Yeah. And so it's knowing your worth and then making sure you understand how that balances out. Which kind of leads me perfectly to my question, which is a little more controversial, but you touched on it, is it harder for men now to find those jobs, right? So does one have to be crossed out versus the other? Or is it kind of finding that balance? I don't know, how do you find that?
I mean, your fellow wackler Laurie Vichen will rattle off all the stats on this one, but I don't think the evidence kind of bears that out. So if you look at the actual numbers, yes, we have a little bit more gender parity on females in boards, but if you look at the makeup of that, they are non-paid fractional roles versus the paid kind of roles that are in power. There's a lot more expectations of us to be what they call board trained, and it's something everyone needs to go through, but I don't think the actual reality bears that out. And to your point about not portraying equality as a zero-sum game, I think it's incredibly damaging to both men and women. So we've done a lot of research in that space at IPSOS, and it's one of the things that we're seeing. Actually, the world is getting more divided at the bottom with young people. Like the widening gap is around the gender divide, and we need to figure out ways to close that and have a more kind of inclusive conversation. And I will say, if I can speak to effectiveness just a bit, because we're all kind of in the advertising and marketing industries, the intersection of my professional and personal passions is about helping businesses do the right thing and follow the money. So we do a lot of evidence-based work on like, what does progressive portrayal for women, progressive portrayal for men look like? And I can tell you that from our ads database, from our creative testing database, like portrayal of women in advertising in the US, only like single figures as business owners, artists, athletes, mostly they're portrayed as sort of wives and girlfriends, and you think like, okay, we can move on from this. There's a lot of headroom. Yeah.
Interesting. And then, Joe, I'm just thinking about it. How can we then tackle that allyship, right? How can we get the onus on men to kind of start owning this conversation and having the gender equality rather than constantly being about us, drumming, the beat and saying, how can we get them more involved and, looking out. It's amazing to see of women, which is great, but then how can we empower and include them in that conversation so that allyship is really in the kind of boardroom conversations?
Well, I think firstly we should acknowledge the one man that's in the room. Right in the middle. Thank you. Thank you for being here, because that's a step in the right direction. Hey, excellent. There you go. That's the answer. We all have to go out, find a man, bring them. No.
Right. Everyone go and find a man.
No. Well, I think it is about the narrative, because I think for so long, as Karen has said, the message has been that women win when men lose, and that's just not true. And when we focus on the equality that we're looking for is really the equality for the opportunity. And then once it's a level playing field, then the best man or woman should win, effectively.
I think just to build on that as well, so I heard something the other week, which I thought was just a fascinating stat, which was, so I was on a panel, or chairing a panel, and a really great chap called Elliot Ray, we were talking about the myth of the supermum. So we're talking about, it's just a title that is not helpful for anybody. So, and he gave us a stat, which was, we asked at the end, like, what can we do to help working mums or working parents in the world? And he said, so the biggest thing we can do that helps everybody is give men 6 weeks, 90% pay, if not full pay, paternity leave, preferably when the mum has gone back to work. Because the mum goes back to work and is anxious because she's left her baby. So the dad is at home, and you need 6 weeks, and that's the tipping point where you get a bond with your child from a father's point of view. The father then understands the work that goes into looking after a baby. He also doesn't feel so nervous about going back to work because he's only had 6 weeks off and it's full pay. His company then understands he needs flexibility. The mum's so the halo effect on all of that, but it starts with paternity leave, which I just really loved, because it's through the lens that looks like it's supporting the man that has the biggest halo effect on helping a mum back at work. Yeah. So I just think I'd love to hear more nuggets like that, which I think more people would lean into, that it's just really easy to do. So I went back to my office, and our paternity leave was 4 weeks, and I changed it to 6.
Oh, wow. Okay, so 6 weeks, everybody, and find a man. Right, I would love to open the floor to questions. I'm not sure if we've got perfect. Amazing.
Can we put the fan on?
Amazing. So, it often feels like men can waffle their way through important conversations while women are questioned or asked to back up anything that they say. How have you dealt with this situation, and how are you kind of openly addressing it? Karen.
So you learn lots of lessons in life as you go through your career. And so I worked at EMAP, which was a big publishing radio owner. And it was bought by the Bauers, which is a German company. And one thing I learned from the German family was they do not move on if they don't understand. And they challenge you when they think you're waffling. And they just don't move on. They do it very politely. They do it. And I've just adopted that a bit. So when I hear waffle, I do go, I just really don't understand what you're saying. It's probably me. Yeah. And don't give, because the Brits, what we do is we go, I don't understand that. Second time, you might understand that. Third time, I bet nearly all of us go, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. See what you mean? And still having no idea. So if you've got a bit of German in you, great. Bring it out. If you haven't, that's quite a good way of just keep going. I really don't. And people run out of steam. And then they realise that they're not. So it's just, and it's quite good fun.
Yeah, fair enough. Joe?
I mean, I think my approach is I just ask questions.
Yeah.
And I keep asking questions. Yeah. And it starts to implode at that point. So it's having the courage to not just let it go.
Right.
Fair enough. Keep asking questions.
Yeah, I love that. And Samira?
What Joe said, basically. But I can appreciate that sometimes it can be difficult if you feel intimidated, but I think the thing is to just breathe and ask yourself, what could possibly go wrong? Clarity will only make you better at everything you are doing. So push and ask the extra question.
Do you want to say something, Karen?
I was just going to say, and the other thing I think what we realise in life, because most of us deal with the same kind of people, the same people. Yeah. People rarely change. You can just anticipate their behaviour and work around it. So just don't get disappointed when you're getting the same behaviour again. Because that's just life.
Human nature.
Just human nature.
Yeah, I completely agree. A question from Lorna. How do you find the balance in transparency of communication as a leader in a moment of change? And how much communication and transparency is too much? There's a lot of examples of not enough, but wonder your thoughts on the right approach. So what is that kind of balance between too much transparency?
My experience is people are really good with the truth. These are adults. These are people. You're running a business. I think, as long as it's not, shareholder sensitive, most of us aren't dealing with that kind of information. Yeah. Tell people the truth and explain it. And I think probably from a cinema point of view, we couldn't have had a harder truth than in the pandemic when we were closed. And I was so impressed by my team, because that's the worst news I had to give every week. They were amazing with the truth. People are not good with the not truth, because that's how rumours and gossip start. Yeah. Most of the stuff we have, you can tell your people. I just don't understand why people don't.
Yeah, thank you. Joe?
Very quickly, I mean, I think it is about telling the truth. I think one of my roles is to make sure that I'm kind of providing an umbrella so that not everything is being filtered down. But actually, in terms of setting strategy, giving business updates, bringing people on board, Karen's absolutely right. We're all grown-ups.
Yeah. 30 seconds, Samira.
I don't think I have anything to add to what this lady said, but apart from, yes, people are grown-ups. Yeah. I think along with transparency, but a little bit of genuine humanity around it as well. So kind of, you do have to apply a little bit of a filter.
You have to be tough on the issue and gentle on the people.
That's exactly it.
Amazing. Well, we'll leave it on that note. I'd like to thank Samira, Joe, and Karen. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for your honesty, and thank you for everyone for showing up today. And let's keep the conversation going on hopefully ending gender equality and making sure that we keep having those honest conversations. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of MadFest. Thank you.